Okay, I don't see it. Um, I'm so sorry. We had this all ready to go and planned. Um, the technology is failing us. So I think we should go ahead and begin, though. And I think the mayor's office is working behind the scenes to try to get our chat up and running. And in the meantime, we won't take the raise hand. We won't use the raise hands feature right now. Well, let's just see if we can get the chat working. And we'll begin the program though, because I did hear there was a World Series game later tonight. So I know people want to get off in time for that, which you will in plenty of time. So let's begin. Welcome everyone from the East and the West Coasts and everywhere in between. Especially those of you who might have had to scoot out of work a little early to get here by 5 o'clock Pacific time. I'm Laurie Kavanaugh, or 4 o'clock, isn't it? 4 o'clock
Yep.
Pacific time. Oh, yeah. And anyone who's in the office with their door closed now, listening. I'm Laurie Kavanaugh. I'm a librarian at Thayer Public Library in Braintree, Massachusetts. And we're the host of tonight's virtual conversation with Kevin T. Myers and Jenna Russell. The conversation will be recorded, but only the speakers will appear on the recording. So anyone in the audience, you don't need to worry about appearing in any way on the recording. So hopefully if you have questions for Kevin, you'll be able to type them into the chat eventually. I will contact the lucky winner of the random drawing for the free copy of Hidden Falls, published by Beaufort Books. There it is. I'll be contacting that lucky winner by email. So I want to get right to introducing our speakers for the night. Jenna Russell is a reporter at the Boston Globe and a contributor to award-winning Globe projects, including 68 blocks, Life, Death, Hope, based on a year of reporting in a Boston neighborhood. A member of the Spotlight investigative team, Jenna Russell is also the co-author of 2 Globe books, Last Lion, a biography of Senator Edward M. Kennedy, and Long Mile Home, about the Boston Marathon bombing. Kevin Myers proudly hails from Peabody, Massachusetts, up on the North Shore, as we say. He's a former stand-up comic and comedy writer. He has appeared on the Comedy Channel and was featured on 2020. His essay, The Power of Compassion, aired nationally on NPR's This I Believe series. He has worked as a journalist and editor in newsrooms from New Hampshire to Alaska and in higher education. He is currently the spokesperson for Reed College in Portland, Oregon. His first novel, that is right, isn't it, Kevin? Your first novel? First novel, right. Hidden Falls, came out earlier this year. It has been described by writer-director Judd Apatow, did I pronounce that right?
Yep.
As Dennis Lehane meets David Sedaris. So I'm very pleased to welcome Kevin and Jenna for their conversation about Hidden Falls and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurie. I am just absolutely delighted to be here with Kevin and with all of you. This is very, very special because I have known Kevin for such a very, very long time. I will not say exactly how long.
Before I had gray hair and glasses, though, for sure.
Yeah, a long, long time. When I met Kevin, I was just beginning my journalism career as a very, very young fledgling reporter for the weekly paper in Swampscott, Massachusetts, on the North Shore. And what amazed me then about Kevin and still amazes me today is how I think first I would say his persistence in pursuing his art and his work and his dreams of creative greatness. And I, feel like Kevin always believed that anything was possible that he wanted to do. And for me, that was very influential and helped me to believe also that anything must be possible, because if Kevin believed it so wholeheartedly, then it must be true. And so I was reminded of his persistence and I think his work ethic when we were preparing to do this event, and we wanted to get together to talk about the event. And he proposed doing this at 6:30 in the morning his time, which I thought was outrageous, and said, Kevin, why do you need to get up so early? Just to, we can do it later. And he said, oh no, I'm up every day at like 5 or 5:30 in the morning to work on my writing. And that was just, it was so true to him. And again, so inspiring to me to see that kind of commitment. So it's thrilling for me to be here to kind of celebrate and explore the work that he's just put out into the world, this amazing novel, Hidden Falls. So I wanna get Kevin talking here a little bit at kind of the obvious place to start, which is the origin of this story. Kevin, when did you first start thinking about doing this book, and how did it evolve for you as an idea? How did this become the story that you were going to tell?
Yeah, wow. Well, first of all, thanks, Jenna. That was quite an introduction. And maybe we should just end the show at this point, because nothing is going to make me feel better than that introduction. That was wonderful. Thank you. And I also, thank you to Lori. So this book started back in about 2014, 2015. I had just gone through some intense therapy to kind of overcome some stuff that I was going through. And I was struggling to find what to read. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to write the book that I want to read right now. And it started as something very, very different. The initial book was based on sort of this real incident. At the time, I was obsessed with the missed connections classified ads. I had just learned about them. And anyway, I couldn't get enough. I explained them in the book as these sort of vignettes of humanity. They were remarkable. And anyway, so I was, every day I would click on these. And then one day I found one that was clearly for me. And I was completely blown away. And it was this person who I had a crush on. And I responded to the ad, and it was the wrong person. Oh, it was humiliating, to say the least. And it was something that I was like, well, this is my book. I'm going to write this book. And I don't write with with an outline. And so what I just sort of create the character's arc and just keep putting sort of obstacles in the character's way and see how they overcome them. And at one point I put in the character's way his father's death. And that changed everything. And then eventually became Hidden Falls.
I would love to have you read a little bit from the book as we get started here to kind of put us in that place. And I'm thinking maybe you could read a bit from the section where your protagonist is arriving back home after his father's death.
You bet. One little thing. So when the protagonist Michael Quinn gets back to Boston, all the economy rental cars are gone, and he gets this super luxury SUV, which he's humiliated by. But anyway, I took my father's old winding route through New Bedford. I drove through the patchwork of suburbs that sprawled south toward Cape Cod. There was something reassuring about the resilience of all the mom and pop roadside taverns, clam shacks, and roast beef sandwich shops that marked the way. Even the ubiquitous Friendly's ice cream parlors and Dunkin' Donuts felt like greetings from old friends. The expressway would have been quicker, and would have taken me past the Boston Globe building, my mecca. But it lacked the nostalgia I was craving. On the back roads, I could drive slowly and keep the windows rolled down in the land yacht. There was a magic quality to the cool, damp New England summer morning air. Being up and out early reminded me of being a paperboy when I delivered the Globe and Herald. The papers were both broadsheets back then. They were dropped in stacks on the sidewalk in front of my house, bound with wire, and they always smelled of fresh ink. I was supposed to count them out, fold them into thirds, and fasten them with rubber bands before starting my route. But I always began by throwing the stack in my bag where I kept my wire cutters. I would cut the wire and then fold them as I approached each house. At first, the bag took all my effort to lift, but it got lighter quickly as I ran through the rows of small capes and double-decker homes. The Polskis wanted their Globe on the front porch. The Mukas had a special holder under their mailbox and always gave me cookies when I came to collect their bill. When dogs still roamed freely through the neighborhood, the Holden's mutt, Hondo, used to run alongside me, wagging his tail. I could still remember the sound of his nails clicking rhythmically against the pavement. I love that dog. I stopped in Abington to get a medium regular at the Dunkin' Donuts across from the used car lot. Regular meant the normal amount of cream and sugar, which was almost enough cream to stop your heart and enough sugar to give you diabetes. It was tastier than I remembered. I had to check the navigation on my iPhone to make sure I was still heading the right way. I was at a junction where my father would have taken a serpentine shortcut to avoid a few extra traffic lights. I was getting close enough to home that my nostalgia began to wane. It was being replaced by the foreboding of my adult obligations. I got jittery. It was hard to tell if my tremors were in response to the caffeine and sugar or my proximity to my family. As I drove closer to my old neighborhood, I could feel myself regressing. Each click of the odometer stripped another layer of veneer from my denial, until all that was left was the raw emotions of an insecure child. Welcome home, I thought.
I just am so, every time I read that, it's just so real to me as a description of what it's like, I think for many people to return back to that place where you started, whether you've been away for a long time or not, maybe. And I thank you as well for the beautiful references to the Globe and its building on the expressway and all things very near and dear to my heart.
So by the way, Jenna picked what I was reading. So I think there was a little self-promotion, maybe.
Just a tiny bit, but it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of the book. Talk a little bit, Kevin, about the importance of homecoming in this novel and why that was important in your storytelling. What opportunities did that give you as a writer and storyteller?
Yeah, I think place was very important to this story. I think the protagonist, Michael Quinn, was, he talks about having sort of tried to escape his hometown, tried to escape the confines of his upbringing and his education. And, he talks about working hard to lose his accent and he sort of gets to this place where, he felt like he wanted to be. And then when he arrived, it's all he wanted was to kind of be back home and fit in, right? Because even though it sort of represented this thing to escape almost, when he got to his destination, when he got to where he thought he really wanted to be, he also felt hollow, and then he didn't feel sort of at home anywhere.
Yeah, and you just so vividly evoke that kind of discomfort that can live in you, and you're not even fully aware of it until you get back there, and then you remember the things that that brings up for you.
Yeah, and that was another part of the book, because Michael is a unreliable narrator. Right. And so it's sort of, there's a lot of things that are, or should be obvious to the reader that are not obvious to Michael, like his entire upbringing. Right. So as he gets home, it's all this stuff that's familiar, but at the same time, he's seeing it through a different lens. He's seeing it, because partially too, I talk about, you know, there's a part in the book where his brother is like, you know, essentially he's like, look, you're a fake, you know, you're writing about my life, not your life. Like you're writing about it as if it's your own, but it's not, you know? And so it was sort of this, you know, he'd been writing about, you know, his columnist, right? He's a columnist. So he's been writing these columns about his dad and about, you know, the loss of his dad and what it means, and that he won't feel like he's at home before he gets to this bar. And he knows while he's writing this, he's probably not going to know anybody at that bar, right? But he's still writing about it like it's his world. And so there's just sort of these layers that get kind of stripped away, both big and small, I think.
And I want to talk about the opening of the book, because you make a very controversial choice here about where to start the story, which I will say the first time I read it, I just thought, oh no, this is, how can we start? So you're starting the book essentially at the moment of your main character's demise, right?
What's wrong with that?
Nothing about it is counterintuitive, but
well, the book is only 6 pages long. It's like it's a novella.
You guys are gonna love it. It's a super quick read. You can fit it in. Please enlighten us about both why you make a choice like that, and then how hard it might be to convince others that that is the right way to begin.
Yeah, I kind of did it out of necessity. As I mentioned, the first iteration of this book was really very much a mistaken identity sort of like love story. And I was working with a developmental editor. And so I sent her like the first, whatever it was, 20, 30,000 words. And she loved it. She was gushing about it. And then I get to this point where the father dies, and then it starts to become Hidden Falls, right? So it's like, essentially it's a mashup of these things that just don't fit together. And she was just like, what are you doing? Like she was like, you had this beautiful thing. And she's like, now you have this other thing, which I also love. She's like, but you can't, it's not one thing. And I was like, no, I can make it one thing. And I tried really hard for a really long time, and I failed for, you know, a really long time at trying to make it work. And then it didn't work for me even as a linear story. And so it really didn't work until it was told in flashback from the moment, you know, essentially from the climax, right? So essentially, you know, we start at the climax and then we go back and we sort of follow the story and then find out how he got there, right? And so, so for me, it was, you know, it was really fun to do it that way. It really, after I did that, the voice of the book changed and really became what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, because it worked, right? So it just, yeah.
And it does immediately present the high stakes of the story. So you know you're going towards something like that is literally life and death, which is pretty motivating for a reader.
Well, that's it. And then because at first it's like, right, there's, you know, you know, here's this kid remembering back to his trips to the White Mountain, and you know, he's sort of work a day, you know, midlife crisis job that's not working out the way he thought. And then it's a gangster novel, right?
Right.
So to make that all work, I felt like we really had to introduce that aspect of it. And because Michael was such an unreliable, or is such an unreliable narrator, I felt like it was the only way to sort of make the book cohesive.
And the book is, I have to say, it's remarkably cohesive, given that I think is quite unusual in the way that it combines both. It's very plot driven and tons of action and kind of thriller suspensey, but at the same time, like it's very deep, and these literary themes that you're mining are you know, just brimming with emotion and character development. And you've somehow made those two things meld together in a way that if you described it to me at the outset, I would have said maybe it couldn't be done, but.
Yeah, thank you. And I do and I did bring the narration very much into his head, right? Because it did, to carry through those different sort of Peter Rock, right, on the back of the book calls it, a love story or two, and a mystery or two, and a thriller or two, right? And so to be able to tie all that sort of external, fun, thrilling stuff, I really did feel like, you had to be in Michael's head. You had to be thinking his thoughts and seeing the world as he saw it. And even though, because he's an unreliable narrator, you're seeing it even more clearly, right, than he's seeing it through most of it. But yeah.
So let me ask you to read a little more. I'm checking here. I apologize because I would love to be getting some questions, but hopefully the chat's going to come up and function. But in the meantime, Kevin, why don't you read us a bit of, I'll call it the title section, but the part where we learn about Hidden Falls and what that significance is.
You bet. So just to set it up a little bit. So this comes very early on in the book where Michael just dropped his son off at college, and he's driving back and he's kind of lamenting about his relationship with his son. He wishes that was closer. And then he's kind of thinking about his relationship with his own dad and wishing that was closer. And then afraid that, his relationship with his son is never going to be any stronger than it is in that moment. And so he remembers back. So Michael remembers back to this trip to the White Mountains of New Hampshire, which was supposed to be this bonding moment, and it just ends up turning into a disaster. So this part that I'm about to read is it's the second day of the camping trip, and they're going to Hidden Falls, which in Michael's mind, it's a combination of, I don't know, Disneyland, Las Vegas, and El Dorado or something, right? So the dad has a canteen, water canteen, a ref's whistle, and a little box wrapped in butcher block paper. After about 30 minutes of winding through narrow back roads, we turned onto an even narrower dirt road. The country squire wasn't really made for country driving, and we bounced so vigorously over swells and potholes that we joked about putting on our seatbelts. We came to a stop where the road widened enough for my father to make a 3-point turn. He shifted the car into park. His face became so serious that it frightened me. It was tight with an urgency reserved for illness, divorce, and death. My heart skipped as he reached across and opened the door. "Straight out there, Michael, is your future." He handed me the canteen and I almost shat myself. "Dad," I started. "Listen," he interrupted. His eyes softened a bit. He placed the box in the canteen on my lap. "The water you need to survive, but in this box is the most important thing I'll ever give you. The most important thing any father can give a son, more than money or the keys to the family business. It's direction. The swimming hole is about a mile due north. In that box is a compass. The needle always points north. Follow the needle, and I'll be waiting for you when you get there." And with that, he pushed me out of the car and drove only a few yards before slamming on the brakes. The car slid to a halt on the rocky dirt road. I thought this is where he'd say, "Just kidding," out the window, but instead he tossed me the whistle and shouted, "And if you get lost, blow this every few minutes until someone finds you," before he drove off again. The whistle was attached to a hockey lace that my father had balled in his hand. He had a good throwing arm, but it didn't reach me. The lace uncoiled and fluttered behind the hard plastic casing like a vapor trail of a sputtering plane. I didn't move to catch it. I just watched it hit the ground. The car bounced and bobbled away from me. I was dumbfounded. I stood by the side of the road like an expectant dog tied to a pole waiting for its owner to return. Anger slowly burned away my initial fog of disbelief. I wanted to get to the swimming hole so I could yell at my father, maybe even punch him. My palms sweated through the wrapping of the package, and before I got around to opening it. It took me a few minutes to untie the string and clear away the damp paper. The compass looked like a pocket watch. On the front of it was engraved, always move toward your goals. Okay, I get it, I said aloud. It's good to have a goal. Now you can come back and get me.
And this
I'll give
section,
another moment for the applause. Just
and I should say that this section goes on to describe his journey from that point, which I won't reveal if he makes it to Hidden Falls. But this is obviously, for the narrator, an incredibly important moment from his childhood. And I think he describes it as really a unique moment in his relationship with his father that is never replicated and sort of stands alone in his memory.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So when he's thinking about this moment, right? And he's thinking about, he's driving back, he's upset about his son, and in a line that got edited out from this, right? Because they don't have a great connection, and Michael goes back to this story over and over again, and he goes back to this compass over and over again, and he doesn't really understand why till much later in the book. But one of a line that got edited out, probably rightfully, was, he says, calling my father was like, for comfort, calling my father looking for comfort was like searching for the PETA website for tips on cooking snow leopard. Thank you, editor, for making me remove that line.
I think we could debate the merits of keeping that line in the story. But, did you write this early on, or did you come back and get to this toward the end?
I wrote this early on. This was, I was kind of writing this as a short story. So I'd been asked to write something for Alaska Public Television. And it was about journeys, and this is what I wrote. And it was at the same time that I was writing, the Misconnections version of Hidden Falls. And the way that I approached this was as the protagonist as a kid, right? And it was really kind of an exercise for myself, but it was also something that I thought would be good for the Alaska Public Television piece. And so I kind of wrote it in tandem, never really thinking that it would become one thing. But then after it became, what it is now, and the father played such a prominent role, it just seemed like such a natural place for it. And I changed it quite a bit to make it work within the context of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, so it was a piece that, exactly, was kind of written as a standalone piece, but also, written as Michael Quinn as a kid.
And how much of, how much did you know at the beginning of the process that so much of the story would be about his relationship with his father? And how much was that revealed to you in the process of writing the book?
100% of it was revealed to me in the writing of the book.
Really?
I did not intend at all to have the father be part of this. But then when the father did become part of it, it became the most intriguing part to me, right? So that's why I went back and kind of threw out that whole other Misconnections piece. A little bit of that stays in there. And I really loved those parts of it. But yeah, I mean, it's whatever, 3% of what it had been. It was completely, again, because I felt the need to explain the character in the way, again, that I do that is you just sort of, you think, where is the character at the beginning of the book? And then I just start writing. So I just start writing at page 1 and keep on going. And when I got to the parts with the father, all this stuff just started to unwind and come out, and it just became so intriguing, right? And if I mean, I spent years writing this book, right? And if you're going to spend years waking up at 5 a.m. every morning, right, you're going to love it. Like you've got to want to explore it. You've got to want to be with it. And so, yeah, so it just became really interesting and really intriguing to me to understand how Michael Quinn became Michael Quinn, right? And yeah, and his dad and his brother and the mother and in the town, right? Really, the town is almost like its own character, and so it really all played a much more interesting role than the other the part that I had written.
The town is a fabulous character here, and so alive and so real to me. Although, as I did tell you the other day, that I was a little miffed that you didn't set this story on the North Shore, our native North Shore, just because I wanted to read how you would describe and bring that to life. But I'm sure in a future book we will get to enjoy.
We'll get there, but the other funny part is, and you know a little bit something about this, but because you've done stories about it, but the reason that it was, again, in the sort of the romantic story, he was going home to Peabody. And then when it became about, sort of when crime started to play into it, there's so much of that kind of activity in my hometown that I was like, everybody's going to think this is just a memoir. Like, I
can't do it.
So the way that I chose New Bedford, so Peabody at one point was the leather tanning capital of the world, right? And so a lot of that sort of nostalgia for a time and place that he never experienced, sort of the heyday of New Bedford really was in many ways, inspired by the way I think many folks from Peabody and Gloucester feel about their hometowns. You're sort of connected to this very rich history in past in ways that aren't easily explained in the West, honestly.
And if you will indulge me with one more reading, there is a section that you lead into perfectly there. The one where he's talking about the kind of missing the struggle that he felt.
Yeah.
Rise up out of the place he came from.
Yeah. So just because it starts with these, well, I guess we've kind of talked about it. So Mary is the remnant from the other book. There was so much to figure out about my father, Mary, Ben, and the money, all that money. But as I jogged along the docks, I skipped past all those things to wonder about what would have happened if I never left New Bedford, if I stayed and married a neighborhood girl. I always had crushes on Laurie Whitmore and Susan McGuire. Susan and I would have made lots of freckled, redheaded children. And we put down roots and where my people were buried. I'd still have my accent I worked so hard to lose. Quinns had lived in New Bedford since Frederick Douglass still walked the streets and lamps were fueled by whale oil. I romanticized our maritime heritage, even though my grandfather was the last one to work on a boat over 60 years ago. The vocational continuity bound generations. Fishermen were born into a fraternity. There was a sense of belonging and purpose. It gave life a solid foundation, and I mourned its loss. I felt nostalgia for a life I had never known. I missed the struggle of being a New Bedford kid. I missed the feeling that it was me against the world. I miss knowing nobody gave me a chance at succeeding. It fueled my need to prove that I deserved a place at society's grown-up table. I fought like hell to overcome class barriers and reinvented myself as a newspaperman. When I delivered the Globes and Herald through all kinds of weather, I imagined one day that it would be my byline on the stories everyone wanted to read. But the thing I didn't anticipate was that prodding voice always telling you that you're not good enough never goes away. I still felt like I had to prove I belonged in a world that valued clicks over quality and speed over accuracy, and where writers were replaced by content specialists. I was still a columnist, but how long would it be before I became an opinion specialist? And my job was to scan the incoherent ramblings and comment sections of stories and stitch the wisdom of Sparky 99 and Uncle Chester into something that resembled intelligent human thought. Maybe my father was right. Maybe how you want to be remembered is more important than what you do for a living. I wanted to stop second guessing my own motives and privilege. I just wanted to be me, but it had been a long time since I knew who that was. So how do I want to be, I thought, as I turned around and headed back toward my parents' house. How do I want to be remembered?
Thank you for reading that.
Thank you.
Do you think that he figures out by the end how he does want to be remembered?
I think he does. I think he does. I mean, we already said that, you know, the book starts with him being shot and, you know, dying in a pool of his own blood as the book starts. So he even jokes at the end, you know, that it only took him getting shot to, you know, to figure out, what his father had essentially been trying to tell him in less subtle ways or more subtle ways, obviously than at the point of a gun. But yeah, I think he does figure it out at the end.
What I want to ask a question for the writers out there who, if they're like me, wonder about these things. Was there a part of the book for you that was the hardest to write through? And was there a moment where you stopped and said, I'm not sure I can make this work. I might have to set this aside. Where was the real darkest place in your process here?
That was for sure the first draft of what became Hidden Falls, right? Because it was like somebody was just ripping random pages out of books and sticking them together, right? It was a mess. It was an absolute mess, right? And because I only can work like an hour, 90 minutes, whatever, 2 hours in the mornings, you sort of don't recognize that until you don't read it as a whole very often, right? You can only do that. You're working on these sections and you're really trying to make this section everything it can be. And then, so the first time that I went back to it and realized it was, maybe it wasn't even 2 books, maybe it was 12 books. I was like, I was like, okay, why didn't I just write a short story? Like, why can't I just, maybe haikus were the thing that I should be working on, because this is a disaster and I'm never going to get there. And then bit by bit you do. And, and it just changed. And, again, for the writers, there's that saying, kill your darlings. Which essentially means, you get attached to these things that you write and you just hate to let it go. But yeah, I was lining them up against the wall, 10 at a time. And I killed a lot of darlings to get where the book where it had to be. And then it really wasn't until, very close to that last draft where the character dies in the first chapter that it really started to really work. That was the moment. So the converse of what you're asking, that was the moment at which I was like, wow, I think I'm onto something here. I think this is working. And I went back and kind of just changed the voice and just slightly, not dramatically, but enough that it really, I got excited to wake up in the morning to work on it.
That is awesome. And I have so much respect for what you say about having to let go of those things that may have been with you for years in this case, for which you have a real fondness. And I've been there so many times having to hit that delete button, and it is exquisitely painful, but you're exactly right. That's how you get to where you need to be. And if you have to learn that lesson. So you clearly learned it very well. So what is going to be next for you? Can you give us any glimpse of what you're you're working on something
Well,
now?
Life of Obscurity, I'm guessing. I'm working on another book. And this one is kind of a thriller that takes place on a college campus, and it's not autobiographical. But yeah, this book is also at the point where I'm very excited about it. I'm super charged up every morning to get to it. It's to that phase where I'm just kind of excited to get to it, instead of that, oh my God, I have to get out of bed to look at the same 3 sentences again. Like,
And how do you, I mean, I know this is a hard question to answer because it's not always something you can put into words, but in those phases that aren't jumping out of bed with excitement, when it is a kind of drudgery, how do you motivate yourself to keep getting up at that hour, which is ungodly to me, and just doing it?
I mean, writing is almost an addiction, right? I mean, and it's, so on the days that I don't write, I'm grumpy and I don't feel right. And, and on the days that it's a slog, right? You're just kind of like, well, at least I did it. It's like exercising, right? You're just like, well, at least I did it. And, I'm going to have to throw everything I just wrote into the dustbin, but, but I did it. I was there. And that's what, it is. That's what it takes, is just showing up. Right. And being with it. And it's just, I've been at it long enough, and I've, had the experiences I've had that tell me that, right? Like, every day is not going to be easy, but every hard day is one day closer to the good days, to the fun days. And so it really is just, every day you're hoping for that euphoric high. And you don't always get it, but when you do, there's really very little, right? Like, I had done stand-up comedy, right? That's how I started out my adult life, and I always said there's no feeling like standing in front of an audience and making them laugh. But I'll tell you, there are days when I'm writing where I feel the same. I feel the same way. I'm just like, wow, that was good. I like that. I like the way I feel right now, right? So you get those endorphins going in the same way.
It's just so I feel like I can't hear that enough times, and every time I hear it, especially from you, it's very motivating, because it is 90% discipline, and the rest you can find your way. But just showing up and sitting down and doing it. Do you take a day off now and then?
I try not to, because the thing is so the weekends, are sort of the days when you get to kind of stick with it the most, right?
Right.
And again, I really do. I just don't feel right on the days that I don't write. I just don't feel right. So I do try to get to it every day. I mean, if I go on vacation or something like that, I skip a day, but I bring my computer and I feel guilty. But yeah, I do try to write every day.
So how many, this is another question that's probably really difficult to answer, but if you had to guess at how many drafts of this book you went through before you arrived here, it's probably, you can't count that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
it's hard because it's it's hard. I know.
Because what counts as a new draft is if you
that's the thing, right? So I mean, like, again, when it switched from Misconnections to Hidden Falls, it was 2 years before it was ready. So I probably worked on it for a year at least, right? And then wrote that thing that was, the sort of Frankenstein novel, and I don't mean that in a good way. I know from that point to sending out to publishers was a little more than 2 years. And how many drafts? I don't really know, but a lot. A lot. Again, I tried to salvage so much of that. Tried to save my darlings for too long, really.
Mm-hmm.
It was for too long. And then so yeah, God, I don't know. I mean, from stem to stern, I'm going to say it was 15 or more drafts. But I will say this for the writers, that I am always 2 drafts behind where I think I am.
Wait,
I know when you
mean,
finish it and you're so excited, right? You're just like, oh, I want everybody to read it. And then people are like, what is this? Like, well, why did you give me this?
This is not. I love that. So how do you feel about this thing now that it's like actually a book?
Yeah, it's a real book that's, available at bookstores near you. My agent said, you've got to say that. You could also order it through the Thayer Library. It's surreal, right? It's surreal because, like, first of all, you get up and you write every day and you're working on this thing that I would be working on if it never became a tangible thing that I could hold in my hand, but then it did, right? And it just it just feels weird. So one of the things that writer Fred told me about, like, is you think, well, you wrote this book and it's like, you got to know it intimately and everything. But it's like, by the time you stop writing and the time that you hold it in your hand, it's like 2 years. So you're kind of like, I hope I still like it. Like, like, I hope I still like these things. So there's that part that you don't anticipate, right? That's really kind of interesting. But then it's just like, you have this book. And, back before the pandemic, I was like, this is going to be so fantastic. I'm going to take like 5 or 6 weeks off and I'm going to go back east and I'm going to do these readings and it's going to be fabulous. And I'm going to feel like a real writer. And, I'm going to go to Alaska. I'm going to go to all these different places. And then, of course, it didn't happen, right? And so not only did I not take those weeks off, my work exploded and I was working like, 12-hour days. And so, so there was just a lot of, surreal is an overused word, but it's definitely apt here.
I have definitely shared that experience of once in a while, just like picking up a book I worked on 10 years ago and just reading a couple paragraphs to make sure it's actually okay. Like 10 years after the fact, God, I hope, did I do an okay job on that? Let me just check and make sure.
Make sure I still want to recommend this to people. Exactly.
Right, exactly. My resume, or just take it off the resume. We just have a few minutes left. And again, I want to really thank everybody for coming and being a part of this. Again, my apologies that you weren't able to be engaged directly with the questions, but I hope that we covered a lot of ground that was interesting to you. And Kevin, I hope you will eventually make it here so that you can read in person and we will all be there to join you.
That would be wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for agreeing to do this. I've been, happy to ride your coattails. I don't think there would be this many people would have showed up had you not been part of this. So thank you so much.
That's very kind.
And thank you, Lori, for having us.
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to get myself back on the camera, but I hope you can hear me. I can't get myself back on, but everyone came to hear and see you both. Thank you very much from Thayer Public Library to Kevin T. Myers and Jenna Russell of the Boston Globe. The book again is Hidden Falls, published by Beaufort Books. Came out in July 2020. I wish we could have had you both here in person, as Kevin said. But thank you all for coming virtually and have a good evening.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Lori.
Bye, Kevin.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Lori.
Bye-bye. Thank you.